I'm Rochelle Isaac, current president of Faculty Council. Welcome to President Adams' second town hall. Thank you so much for joining us. We've received so many questions via the registration form, most of which are related to the fall reopening, that I suspect we'll be spending the bulk of our time on this. But you can continue to submit questions as they come up via the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. Once again, the town hall is being recorded and the link to the recording will be circulated shortly. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our language interpreters for their assistance today. And hello, President Adams. You're here on time, no technical mishaps so far?
So far, none, Rochelle. Thank you. Yes, it was a couple nervous moments there where we had to sign me into this. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me say a more formal hello and thank you. As we get started, I want to pause to thank our moderator and my co-host, Dr. Rochelle Isaac of the English department. She's kind enough to volunteer to do this again, play the role of moderator because she did such a great job last time. And thank you, Rochelle, for helping out. I also want to thank Philip Green and Elizabeth Luria. Philip and Elizabeth are our American Sign Language interpreters. You know them well. I'm getting to know them as they've been very helpful at interpreting for many of the events and talks that I give. We have a long list of questions, I understand, from Rochelle, but as some of you know, if you were at the last town hall, this is a spontaneous affair. And by that, I mean, I don't have your questions. Rochelle has them. She pulls them out of a hat and throws them at me in a random kind of way or which way she wants. And I do my best to respond. If we run out of time and some of you have questions, please email them to me anyway at presidentadams@lagcc.cuny.edu. And I can send you a written response. We can also hold questions, for future meetings. So we hope to get we hope to be able to respond to as many questions as possible. In some cases, they're questions, I know Rochelle explained to me that are kind of similar in nature or, they're about a particular issue that's related. So Rochelle may group those together just for a flow of the program. But again, she's our host. It's all up to her. I'm just here to do the best I can to respond to your questions and concerns. And thank you once again, everybody, for joining us. Back to you, Dr. Isaac.
So President Adams, there seems to be a high level of anxiety around the fall reopening. So maybe we start with the Chancellor's memo, where his return to campus announcement stated that CUNY staff will return to campus during the week of August 2nd. Faculty will return to campus in accordance with the academic calendar. Do you have more clarity about this? Any updates?
No, there is no update on that date of August 2nd. And there is a distinction that as you read that, it was clear to all of us between faculty and staff on this issue of returning to campus at least at the moment. And that is that it is true, staff are expected back to campus to work in person on August 2nd, or at least during the week of August 2nd. And I think as everyone knows by now, many staff may request, may want to continue to do remote work. And there's a format or a form that staff can use to make a request of one's manager for a remote work assignment, which is really a continuation of the current policy that began during COVID, enabling CUNY staff to work remotely. But so for staff, the date to remember is August 2nd, and those conversations should start soon between managers and staff, especially in cases of staff that are interested in continuing to work remotely. And there are probably more questions on this, so I'll save the details for later. I do want to, on the question of dates, let me say something else. Think of 3 dates, everybody. Think of June 29th, August 2nd, we just mentioned, and September 9th. And those are the dates I focus on because June 29th is the date of the next Board of Trustees meeting, the CUNY Board of Trustees. And a number of items which are today unresolved, I really, really hope will be resolved by action by the trustees at the end of the month at the meet. So stay tuned or pay attention to the news right around or right after June 29th. August 2nd, again, that is the date when staff, administration, we return to campus. unless we're doing remote work as approved by our managers. And then September 9th, of course, just thinking ahead, is the first day of classes of our fall 1 semester.
Okay, so under what conditions will be physically returning to the classrooms in the fall? Will mask and social distancing be mandated for students and faculty returning for in-person classes?
All right, now here's where we get into an interesting question, Rochelle. And this is just sort of, where we are now. And let me say already, I'm sorry, I don't have more specific information. But you all know, I don't make this up. This is where I kind of play message from the central office. I believe, based on what I've learned in the last several days, that CUNY, right, from across all of CUNY, a consideration is being given to several things, but that proposals on these issues, again, need ratification by the trustees, hopefully at that meeting at the end of June I just mentioned. So for example, there's a possibility that there will be a policy that clearly says that to go to a CUNY campus, let's think of LaGuardia for a second, everyone will either have to be vaccinated and be able to prove that they're vaccinated, or if they're not vaccinated, have proof of a negative COVID test within the last 7 days. So that would mean that anyone in the building, anyone in classrooms and hallways and in our premises would either be vaccinated or not have COVID because they would have a negative COVID test. Then they have to present that to get in. Now that policy does not exist today, but that is a policy that's being considered for consideration. And personally, I think that would be really, really helpful because right now we have a policy that's just, right now we have a situation where.
So he's talking about the return.
Yeah, could please everyone mute, if everyone could please mute your microphones so we don't have background sound. Thank you. Right now, the policies are not, as I was saying, fully baked because we have the governor's mandate that all SUNY and CUNY students be vaccinated to attend in-person classes. But there is yet no mandate for faculty and staff. So the situation's incomplete. Again, I hope there's action on that soon, Rochelle.
Mm-hmm. So if there is going to be such a policy, how will we then effectively enforce mask wearing in classrooms, hallways, and restrooms? Who's going to do the enforcing? Something to think about.
That is something to think about. And there is even this question, do people who have been vaccinated, someone has asked me this recently, do people who have been vaccinated need to wear masks? I mean, right now the answer is yes, but could that change? I think that'll be probably a CDC decision. I do want to pause for a second and separate two really important areas for our consideration. One are decisions that are made by CUNY that affect our return to campus and our health and safety, obviously. And the other are decisions made down in Washington, D.C. So just to summarize, there are three, I call them the 5 variables. 3 are CUNY decisions, 2 are federal government decisions. Will there be a vaccine mandate for faculty and staff? That right now is being, again, considered by, that's a CUNY decision as an employer. What will the verification procedure be? It's one thing to have a mandate. How do you enforce it? So for example, will we use the Excelsior Pass, which is a publicly available state pass you can get on your phone? I downloaded it myself yesterday. Will we use Everbridge modified? We will use a modification to CUNY First. There will have to be a simple, efficient verification procedure to check vaccination status upon arrival, or again, to produce evidence of a recent negative COVID test. Again, this is a CUNY policy that needs to be clarified. The third CUNY policy that needs to be clarified is a plan for surveillance testing. I've mentioned this before, but in many organizations and frankly, other colleges around the country, there's a history now during COVID of surveillance testing. And simply put, that's when you do random samples through a saliva test on a regular basis, like once a week or every other week. And you take samples, let's say 100 people randomly chosen, a simple saliva sample. You do a test of that pool of samples to make sure there is no COVID infection, no virus in your environment. And you do that because you get these negative results time and time again, and it builds people's confidence that it's a safe environment. It's a COVID-free environment. Indeed, I say this, I'm a little superstitious as a person, so I'm going to knock wood on my desk, but we have not had a positive COVID case at LaGuardia in 47 days, which is really good news in terms of just the low positivity rate across the city and now at LaGuardia. So those three issues are to be decided by CUNY, and I hope, again, relatively soon. Vaccine mandate for faculty and staff, yes or no, how does it work? Verification procedure, how do you confirm it, how do you prove it? And a plan possibly for this surveillance testing to maintain a really safe environment where there's no fear of getting COVID. The two issues that remain unsettled, and we need determinations by Washington, are social distancing guidelines and FDA approval of the vaccines. What do I mean by this, Rochelle? We all know now that with social distancing guidelines at 6 feet, we have some real constraints in terms of returning to classrooms and offices. We can only fit small numbers of students in classrooms at 6 feet. And in offices where cubicles are less than 6 feet apart, your workers can't sit side by side. So the current social distancing guidelines present limitations on how much we can return to campus. So again, this is my hope that the federal government, because this is an issue faced by every college and university in the country, not just LaGuardia. So it's my sincere hope that very soon the federal government will, with the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, will modify social distancing guidelines, and frankly, I hope eliminate them. And they could go to 3 feet. That doesn't solve all of our problems. It would be best if the science proved that it was okay now to eliminate them because of the effectiveness of the vaccines and the effectiveness of the negative testing. So that remains to be determined by the federal government. CUNY obviously has no say there. And finally, the last piece that has to be determined by the federal government. This is very important. We need final FDA approval of these vaccines. Because quite honestly, and I think most of you know this, the governor put out a mandate for students that can't be enforced, because you cannot force someone to take a vaccine that's still only conditionally approved by the FDA. So the Food and Drug Administration needs to give final full approval to vaccines like the Johnson & Johnson or the Pfizer or the Moderna. And they're working on that. And they know they need to do this, again, not just for this, but for everybody in the country, all employers, all colleges and universities, all sorts of places that say they want to require people to take vaccines. Again, not right. You can't require, government can't require you to take a vaccine that doesn't have full FDA approval. So we could have the mandate, but we couldn't enforce it, right? So again, 3 variables to be determined by CUNY, hopefully most of them resolved by the trustees at the end of this month of June, 2 variables to be resolved by the federal government. All 5 lead us to health and safety conditions that enable us to go back to campus.
So this kind of addresses the number of questions we have here about vaccination policy. And one is, will CUNY require COVID vaccination of students as a condition of enrollment? And I guess you're saying we can't enforce that?
I put it to you this way. We certainly encourage it. We're kind of acting for students anyway right now. And this goes for students in ACE, by the way, as well as students who are enrolling now for the fall. We are telling them they must be vaccinated. And I think that's the right, and if they say, do I have to do it today? I mean, we're encouraging them to. We cannot enforce it, but we're not bringing them to campus right now anyway, right? So, but it would be a mistake, I think, to not encourage vaccination from a public health standpoint. I think that's a mistake. But we don't want to have a situation where all of a sudden the FDA approves the vaccines, and then the governor's mandate applies to SUNY and CUNY. And then there's a whole lot of students that didn't get vaccinated and they don't have time. Remember, if you do the double dose vaccine, you need several weeks between doses and several weeks for efficacy from your final dose to when you really can be safely vaccinated, right? That's 3 weeks. I say this because I need advisors, please, to start thinking about this from a timing standpoint. Remember I said September 9th, first day of classes. Well, back up 3 weeks. Think about a student that gets the second Pfizer shot less than 3 weeks before that and who wants to go to campus for classes. She or he cannot get on campus if they haven't passed that 3 week period after the second shot, which would be in early August, right? But wait, you need to there's 2 weeks pause between shots, right? So this is Pfizer anyway. And so the first shot would be happening in July. Now, we know how students act. Do they do everything at the last minute, or do they do everything with lots of thoughtfulness and planning and plenty of time? No, they're more like me. They wait for the last minute. With vaccinations, you can't wait for the last minute because you won't be cleared to get on campus by September 9th. So advisors who are out there and others, please think about, get the calendar out and work backwards from the first day of class and think about dates by which you should really urge students to be completely and fully vaccinated so they don't get caught in that box where they're sort of vaccinated, but they still can't come to class and they miss their first few classes because they're waiting for the vaccine to kick in.
What about employees? Can employees provide a negative COVID test without being vaccinated? Will that suffice?
That should suffice, Rochelle, but not yet. I need to make this clear that the concept of everybody being either vaccinated, I mean everybody, students, faculty, and staff, guests, visitors, delivery, the guy who delivers your food to your office from the deli. The idea of enforcing that and either fully vaccinated or negative COVID test, again, within 7 days, is that's the scenario. That is a possible policy solution. It is not official, and there is no start date for it yet because it hasn't been approved. My own hope is that is approved by August 2nd, by the way. That would make the most sense, and it would be consistent with the chancellor's use of that date, let's just say. So for now, Rochelle, we remain with our current plan, which means, and I was on campus yesterday, we use Everbridge, we do temperature checks at the door, we use social distancing, we wear masks, we stay 6 feet apart, and so on. So that is in place until further notice. But again, talking about returning to campus in August, and then for faculty and staff in September, again, I say plan for the best scenario. Let's all work and plan for what should be ideal, for what is best for our students and best for LaGuardia. And that's a scenario where we've got about 60% of our course offerings in person are hybrid, and about 60% of our customer or student serving functions, right? Staff and administrative functions on campus as well. And to get there, we imagine a scenario, again, plan for the best, where there's no social distancing anymore, or it's minimal, right? The FDA has approved all the vaccines, final approval, so that we can enforce this requirement that you are vaccinated or you demonstrate a negative test to get in. That, with surveillance testing, creates an absolutely safe environment that should give us all the confidence to go back to LaGuardia.
So let's talk about ventilation. What measures have been taken to guarantee a safe return to campus offices, including facility improvements?
Well, the biggest issue, I think, and we spent a lot of time on this in a meeting I had earlier this week, both with our VP for Finance and Administration, Shahir Irfan, and then colleagues at the central office of CUNY, has been a focus on HVAC. And here LaGuardia is not alone. We have old buildings, we have old systems. We have done, we will have completely finished by August 2nd, a total overhaul of our HVAC systems. And by that, I mean a review of them. And I'm going to there's a detail of this I need to explain in a second. And the replacement or upgrading of all the filters to MERV 13. MERV 13 is the standard, highest level mandated filter that during COVID was required. All right. So we have, Shahir and the team have done a great job, but just because we want to do what they call, belts and suspenders and double check, the CUNY central office has hired 2 well-regarded engineering firms as outside, if you will, consultants. Those firms are visiting every campus and they are double checking the HVAC systems of every room, hallway, building, facility, all across CUNY at significant expense, but I believe this is paid for by some of the federal money. So we've done our improvements and now we're going to get a visit from the engineering team. I know that today's the 4th, I believe the 6th is the date for our meeting with them. This coincides with another important date of June 15th. June 15th is the deadline for all colleges in CUNY to submit their return to work plans or return to campus plans. And this is the great work of Denise Gomez and 29 people on Denise Gomez's committee, the reopening committee. They have a plan, and it's complicated because they had to do 2 versions. They got to do a plan for the reopening of LaGuardia with 6-foot social distancing still in place. And that creates certain constraints, as I said before, requires plexiglass partitions, requires less density, if you will, less people on campus. They also have to do a plan for 3 feet in case, again, the CDC decides to go to 3 feet. So Denise and her committee of 29 people are doing these plans. Both plans, and obviously people should contact them if they have questions. It's a tremendous amount of work, are the 6 foot and the 3rd foot. They're due June 15th. After that, CUNY the central office will review them, approve them quickly, and then we want to start doing walkthroughs. We have to do walkthroughs, especially with our colleagues in different unions, not just the PTB, obviously PSC, DC 37, and the other collective bargaining units we have on campus. Their representatives will do walkthroughs with Shahir and Ken and the team again, that's sort of the 3rd level of review. So we do the work, CUNY sends engineering folks to evaluate the work, and then our colleagues on behalf of the various collective bargaining units, we do walkthroughs together, answer all their questions, and really the goal here is build everybody's confidence that LaGuardia is safe and clean and you're protected. And once these policies are in place, we can all go back to work with safety as the #1 concern and having addressed those concerns.
What about the B building? Because a lot of people are saying that the offices are windowless, the indoor air quality is inadequate, etc. And they're concerned about the new air filtration systems. Do we have new ones?
Yes, I'll put it to you this way. I mean, it's true, the B building is leased space. I think they're, we have a couple years left, 3 years left on the lease and an option for renewal. That's a real estate question for LaGuardia down the road. But there will be no space used by the college that has not been fully approved, in the value, included lease space. So there will be no spaces in the B building that will be part of the reopening plan, right? If they haven't been fully checked out, vetted. And so if there's something there, if there's a room that's not fixed or the landlord failed to put a MERV 13 filter in, we're locking the door. No one's going in. But everything, according to Shahir, I believe it's all going to be fine later. But for now, we will look at that very carefully and we'll never use space that's not safe.
And I think that would include adjunct offices, right? Because that's the question we have. Yes,
and I know. And I've been meeting with groups of adjuncts. And one of the issues they raised for me, Rochelle, was just not having enough space to work in some departments, not having proper places to leave their computers and their books and papers and students' work, and a place to, again, proper office space and proper even like lounge space. So we want to work on that. We do want to address that. But again, no space. No one is going to work in a space where I want to be able to personally tell you, right, that space has been cleaned and checked. The HVAC it's the right filter. It's totally compliant with all the requirements. No one's going to work in a space that doesn't meet those standards. And adjuncts are every bit as much of the LaGuardia family as anybody else full-time, okay? So no one's going to work in a space that's not right. And frankly, I'm just saying this is a separate issue. We need to do better by our adjuncts in terms of space.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we move to class size and teaching. Will any of the classes that students register to take online be changed to in-person in the fall, even though students have already registered for that modality?
That's interesting. And this is tricky. And you and I've talked about it. Members of the audience should be reminded that Dr. Isaac is a member of my cabinet, and I see her every Monday morning, and it's really important to have faculty representation in the cabinet because we talk about this. The same is true, of course, of Dr. Christy Bruns. The hope is that we can, in the next few weeks, especially before people go on break, that we can schedule as close to 60% of our fall sections in person or hybrid. And that's not because I'm making that up. That's not because the chancellor put the number out there. It's because that's what our students have asked for. And that's what I can imagine, I think we can all imagine, our incoming freshman students expect, especially if they're coming out of DOE high schools, where they spent the last 2.5 years of high school. Think about that, doing high school online. They want to come to campus. I would argue in higher percentages than our returning students, many of whom have succeeded online. So in any case, we want to aim for that, Rochelle, and schedule as many sections in person or hybrid as we can because, and again, plan for the best. I mean, I'm an optimist. You're getting to know me. Plan for the best possible scenario and the ideal conditions for the fall. And then which I agree, those conditions require actions by the CUNY trustees and action by the federal government. And I'm counting on that. I'm betting on that action. And then we'll have these ideal conditions. And then we'll be set up to accommodate our students and deliver for them what they want. And it's a lot easier, Rochelle. We know this, unfortunately, from the 14 months ago, from the onset of the pandemic. It's a lot easier to take a class that's been scheduled in person or hybrid and move it online than it is to take an online class, right? That students especially one where students have intentionally selected that because they have childcare issues, because they work. It's a scheduling thing, or they can't get to, it's a scheduling issue. They can't get down to Long Island City for that class. So it's really hard on students and on faculty to do it in reverse order, to go from an online class and then all of a sudden the last minute convert that to fully remote. Fully in person. Now, there could be instances where we go from what is now a fully online section to a hybrid, if that could be done, right? And that is better to do that now. Again, if we can do that now, and I implore people to please consider doing that if you can, to have that set up to plan for success, to plan for a really good outcome. Because it's a lot easier to go in the direction of converting an in-person or hybrid to online than it is from the other way, right? Online to in-person.
Yet online instruction is time intensive. Smaller class sizes are needed to provide adequate student support. Will online class caps be reduced to reflect this workload and to help our students succeed?
Well, online, the size of online classes, no, I'm thinking about this. You can tell I'm pausing because I want to get this right. I don't see a way now to make what have been online classes any smaller, even though I know it's a burden and it's a lot of extra work for faculty. It's why I encourage faculty to, as much as they can, even if they're not comfortable. Here's a way to think about this. You may today feel, for very good reasons, uncomfortable committing to teaching hybrid or in person. And I get that and fully understand that. But please consider planning for that, because I'm not asking for a commitment. I think we should plan for the best, right? And then see if we get there, because these 5 variables I mentioned are satisfactory, are successfully addressed. So, and then we can do what we want to do. So I don't, there's another issue here. So one issue that are the class size, the class caps for online courses. Will they get smaller? I highly doubt we'll be able to do that. And we have to go to enrollment, and that issue of, I don't want to spend too much. This is not a happy thing for Friday afternoon, but let's remember we're at an all-time low, 15-year low in terms of enrollment, right? We have 12,000 students for the spring semester that's now ended. And we haven't had a spring semester with such low enrollment since 2006. So we're at a 15-year low in LaGuardia enrollment. And that is putting an incredible constraint on our budget. We will close the fiscal year, right, in about 3 weeks' time, well, a little more than that. June 30th is the end of our fiscal year. We will end the year with a deficit of $14.5 million. The next day is July 1st. We start a new fiscal year. We will begin that year based on this falling enrollment. This falling enrollment is causing, and it is reducing our tuition revenue against the projection by CUNY by at least $10 million for one fiscal year. So we're going to start, I'm sorry, tough medicine, the new fiscal year, July 1, right, in a scant 3 weeks away, with a $27 million deficit. Overnight, we're going to have a $14.5 million deficit turn into a $27 million deficit. And we will use the federal funding, that we'll be getting to address these deficits as much as we can. But with that in mind, again, I don't like to be the bearer of bad news, but with that in mind, it's just hard to continue to reduce class size. We did some of that, as everybody knows. Paul and I and the chairs worked very hard to make sure that all of our adjuncts maintain their health insurance coming into the spring semester. And there was only one adjunct that actually didn't get all the sections he or she wanted. Only one, or I should say didn't get any sections, one out of over 400, I believe. So point of the story is, in the middle of the pandemic, we dug deep and we did the best. And I want to thank friends in the PSC and Laura Tannenbaum, our chapter chair, who really advocated very effectively on behalf of our adjuncts. And we did our best to make sure they kept their health insurance and that there were minimal losses of sections. But moving forward, again, we will do our best, but I have to say the financial context is very challenging. So lowering class sizes right now, it looks really difficult.
So people who signed up, this is about face-to-face in-person classes, people who signed up to teach in person were offered 1 day a week on campus with smaller classes. When Provost Zacharias spoke, Paul, I know you're on here, not sure where you spoke, but it sounded that it might be altered. Will faculty be allowed to opt out if the deal offered changes?
Well, Rochelle, this is a misunderstanding. I really want to try to clarify. There was no deal. There was no deal, but there was no notion that if you taught on campus, you'd have a smaller section. The reason the sections were smaller was 6-foot social distancing, right? In other words, I guess you could thank if you came on campus, and there weren't, a teaching on campus in a classroom that used to hold 20 or 30 students, and you apply a 6-foot social distancing rule, forces the class size to be smaller. So it was social distancing that made those sections smaller, not some type of deal or like an incentive, come to campus and get a smaller group. No, it was two different things that worked there. Thank you still, I want to say, right? And I want to continue to say thank you to all of the faculty who are now vaccinated and willing to come to campus, are willing to schedule with their chairs sections of their classes on campus or hybrid for the fall. It's really, really helpful because it's what our students want.
So there's a question here about, again, about face-to-face in-person classes. How can we provide students with the classes they need if the numbers are reduced? Are we planning to hire or rehire teaching staff and increase the number of sections for each course?
Well, again, it's a little early. We're starting to register students for the fall. We're about 13% behind where we want to be year over year. In other words, at this date, on June 4th, which makes me very nervous about that 12,000 number, because that 12,000 has to be the low. We've got to build up enrollment for the fall. And then, as we build, remember, in the number of sections and the number of adjuncts, it's related to enrollment. These are not separate topics, right? And so and again, what I try to make clear is it's a tough, this is hard, right? And it's even hard for me to say it, but this dramatic drop in enrollment creates a dramatic drop in revenue. And we already have a deficit, as I explained. So again, right now, we want to run all the sections that are required, that we need to run. And I hope the number grows. And I hope over the summer, we recruit more and more students. And this is the leadership in enrollment management under Gail Jacks Barrett. We're really going to do everything we can to increase enrollment. If we succeed in increasing enrollment, then Rochelle, yes, we could add sections.
Okay. We have some questions about enrollment, but I want to cover remote work first. Can you clarify and define the exact protocol for determining if a department or employee is eligible for a remote work schedule?
Well, first of all, everybody, generally speaking, everybody's eligible in the sense that they can ask for it, right? Everyone has the right to, this is about staff, right? Because of the CUNY policy around remote work. And again, think of it as a continuation of the policy put in place at the beginning of the pandemic when the whole university went remote. It's policy in effect, by the way, to August 31st, 2022, and requires, I think, 6-month renewals. But CUNY is extending, if you will, this sort of current opportunity for remote work, at least through August of 2022. And I think that's great. I really think as an employer, it's the right thing to do. I think we've learned how to do work remotely. And I think we have departments at LaGuardia that have done an amazing job. And frankly, could have a lot of people in those departments that will continue to work remotely if that's what's best for the institution, if that's what's best for our students. So number one, Rochelle, let's think of it this way. August 2nd, staff have to go back to campus. between now and August 2nd, anyone who, and some staff will say, yeah, I'm ready to do that. I want to do that. I'm going back to my office or my desk or my post, and I'm going to work, 5 days a week, my regular schedule. But, and so that will be our assumption, or a manager's assumption, if we don't hear from you. However, I fully expect many members of our LaGuardia staff at all levels will approach their manager. And again, this should start happening in the next several weeks, and say, there's an aspect of my job I'd like to still do remotely. And that could be, I want to work a few hours a week remotely, a full day, 2, 3, 4 days a week remotely is possible. 5 days a week, fully remote work is possible in this agreement, right? This is negotiations, very, very thoughtful negotiations by the PSC and CUNY management. Now, in the case of if you want to work your entire job remotely, those will be rare instances and they require approval by HR. But otherwise, this is a pretty simple discussion between every member of the staff who's interested in continuing to work remotely and her or his manager. And it stays right there. There's actually a form, you've probably seen it. It's it's a form that you download and fill out and send to your manager, and only the manager signs it. The manager has approval authority here. So these discussions will happen, and every department's going to be different. It's going to be interesting. There are areas where we have student-facing services that are really important to do, or just more effective face-to-face. And if that's what's best for the student, and if that's what the students want, well, we need those employees to go back to working face-to-face with those students. But we have other functions that can be done remotely. Some of the administrative functions, everyone knows what I'm talking about if you think about your own job. And some of that can be done remotely to different degrees. There are two considerations here to bear in mind. Again, let's plan for optimal conditions. But practically speaking, right now, it's hard to figure all of this out with social distancing in place. That's why, again, Denise Gomez has done her reopening plan, because different parts of the college are not set up for everybody to go back and sit next to each other, right? Because you can't do the 6-foot social distancing. So again, it depends on where you work, what your office is. Denise, Shahir, the team have looked at all the offices and all the spaces. So again, you'll have that discussion with your manager, because there may be situations where an office is set up in a way that there used to be, let's say, 6 people working there. Well, now there can only be 3. And so remote work is in part, okay, 3 of us are going to go in Monday, Wednesday, Friday. 3 of us are going to go in Tuesday, Thursday. Every case will be a little different.
So a colleague wants us to consider that best for our students might be distinct from best for enrollment. I just thought I should put that out there.
Say that, Rochelle, say that again. Best for our students.
Best for our students as distinct for best for enrollment. Something for us to consider as we make our decisions.
I love the comment, but I'm probably spinning it in a way that the person who made it may not appreciate. So, what I think is this. I think all of this uncertainty is bad for enrollment. We need to tell, right now, we have literally thousands of prospective students. We got the list. Gail and her team got the list from CUNY Central this week, because we're in the let's call it enrollment season, where students who have applied, you apply to CUNY and you say LaGuardia is your first choice. We accept you, and then we have to try to track you down and have that conversation and say, no, please don't go to Queensborough. Please don't go to BMCC. We want you to come to LaGuardia. We need to give those students, I call them students on the fence. They've been accepted by us, but we have accepted them. They have not accepted LaGuardia, and we need them to want to come to LaGuardia. So when we get on the phone with them or doing a chat or something, we can't tell them, well, we don't know what the fall is going to look like. Because if they say, well, I want to be, I'm big accounting and I want to do it in person, and we say, well, we're not sure about that. That's not going to help us with enrollment. So the situation where there's this uncertainty, yes, it's problematic for faculty and staff, that's for sure. But it's also problematic for people on the front lines of recruitment and enrollment, right, on Gail's team, because they need to tell students what to expect. And it's even better if they can tell students, you can expect what you want. I don't like I don't want to overplay the analogy, but it's the old Burger King story. Have it your way. We need to be able to tell students, what do you want? You want your class online? Great, we have that. You want it hybrid? We got that too. Oh, you want it in person? No problem, have it your way. That is what we've got to do to drive enrollment.
So actually, we have a couple of questions about enrollment. Can we further focus our work to meet the fall enrollment targets? Consider modeling the 2015 CUNY Strategic Investment Initiative that resulted in 5 collaborative proposals. And parenthetically, Associate Dean Faye Butler was on the selection committee.
Well, I just had a long call with Associate Dean Faye Butler last night, and I don't know what this is before my time. It sounds great. The answer is yes. When it comes to strategies to build enrollment for the fall, as Ross Perot used to say, I am all ears. Like, tell me and tell Faye and tell, let's put it all on the table. We've got to do so much. I mean, there are a lot of great ideas out there. I will say, I firmly believe probably most of the 99% of the solutions for our enrollment crisis are here. We have the answers in the expertise of our LaGuardia staff.
So we have another suggestion, and that is to create scholarships for international students. Do you think that's a really good idea? And then to think about students who had to drop out for financial reasons and suggesting that we help them. Can we offer them work study, for instance?
Both of them, Rochelle, both are really fantastic ideas. I say yes and yes. How about that for a short answer? They're great ideas and we should do it. By the way, thanks to the foundation and the new fundraising campaign that we're doing, the LaGuardia Challenge, we're going to have more resources by the fall than ever to help students. And that could, this will be up to the foundation board, but we had a meeting last night and we've started talking about broadening the eligibility criteria for foundation scholarships. Because we are planning to raise a lot more money, we want to serve a lot more students. I'll give you, for instance, we do not give scholarships to entering students, to freshmen. You have to do 1 semester so that you have a GPA, and then if you have a GPA of 2.0, you're eligible. Well, guess what? If we could, and this is a question for the foundation board, right? But if we could say, based on your high school GPA, right? Or some other record of high school success, you're eligible for a scholarship as your first semester. That could help with enrollment, right? Number one. Number two, we do not give scholarships currently to part-time students, but 44% of our LaGuardia students attend part-time. We haven't had the money to do all this, but if we can raise more money and provide more financial relief to our students, that helps them. But frankly, I think it also help distinguish LaGuardia because other schools aren't going to be able to do that. And that could help our enrollment. So I love the idea. And international students also. Internationals, by the way, just so people know, are eligible for foundation scholarships already, but we'll do a better job marketing that and recruiting based on that.
Just one more thing about enrollment. There's another suggestion about having an official network to stay in contact with our successful alumni for the purpose of recruitment. That might be something to consider as well.
That is, okay, this is great. And, I owe Anthony Pappas a call because he's the head of alumni, as you know, and he's great at this. And I promised him I'd follow up, and I need to do that. On bottom line, Rochelle, we've got to do a better job reaching out to our alumni and honoring their achievements, staying in touch with them, having them serve as ambassadors to LaGuardia for recruitment purposes, for fundraising purposes. We had a young man named Guy Fei who joined the foundation board. He was voted onto our board last night. LaGuardia student originally from China, came to LaGuardia, first person in his family to graduate from high school, and actually came with his parents to Queens, went through LaGuardia, went to, I think, Columbia University, is working at Citibank now in a very kind of refined high-end area. He joined the foundation board and gave a check. And this guy is, Ife is a terrific young man, an example of an alumnus. Now, he may be a rock star. I'm not saying everybody has to be a rock star, but we've got to do a better job finding our former students, right? And roping them in and giving them a big LaGuardia hug And I promise, Anthony, I'll call him back. I owe him a call to work on this.
We have a couple of questions about TELC, and it seems as if they suggest that there's a dual classification, a pitting of the CETs against the adjuncts there. So they're saying that the ratio of the CETs to adjuncts appear fair on the surface, but the suggestion is that the CETs have replaced the adjuncts, and they're teaching 67.5% of the courses, and they want to know, is that fair, and are you going to address that?
Well, some of you have heard me talk about this before. I mean, it's just a really tough situation. And it's all the, it's thank you, COVID and COVID related enrollment problems. We lost 70% of our students, in TELC. And with that, so many sections, right? So many classes, ESL classes. And what we've been trying to do, to be fair, is there was a ratio or a relationship between the number of CETs, and again, for people who want the details, a CET is a continuing education teacher. It's a title in CUNY for people who work in ACE, who are continuing ed instructors, as opposed to the adjuncts who are adjuncts. And it's a rare situation we have at LaGuardia, because you normally don't have adjuncts teaching in continuing ed. But in any case, we've always had that at LaGuardia. So there's a balance between the two, right? Between how many of the TELC instructors are CETs and how many of them are adjuncts. And what we've done is been consistent at sticking to kind of a balance between CETs and adjuncts that we began at the beginning of COVID. And we're staying with that balance, right? To be fair and consistent. But as long as we continue to build up the enrollment, and we are, good news here, building up the enrollment, then we're hiring people back. And, at least for the last semester I checked, every adjunct that wanted classes was given classes. There were some that for personal or scheduling reasons didn't want to teach. Moving into the summer, we're just going to continue to monitor enrollment, do everything we can. By the way, we're doing some new advertising, we're doing new outreach. We're really trying to rebuild enrollment, and then we can get the adjuncts back to the level that they hope to be at. There is a detail here people need to know, that this is the adjuncts that teach in the TELC are protected by a special settlement agreement from a number of years ago. And so they can continue to teach in the TELC, but over time, if, for example, there's a retirement, then that person who's retired is not replaced by a new adjunct hire. That would turn into a replacement by a CET, but that's only if that adjunct voluntarily separates through retirement. Right now, we're just maintaining that balance that we've had and trying to rebuild the enrollment.
So we had so many questions about reopening, so I'm going to go back to a couple that I glossed over before. And the first part of this, I think we've answered. Can you tell us when the library, the writing center, financial aid, and other offices that serve students directly will be reopening? I think that's August 2nd, right? But then there's the additional part about the ECLC, the Early Childhood Learning Center. They want to know, when will that be opened, and when will faculty and staff be informed about whether or not students who are already registered are still eligible to attend?
Rochelle, I try to prepare for these meetings. I try to guess what questions will be asked. I try to have the answers at my fingertips. I don't have no, I'm not making this up. I don't know about the Early Childhood Learning Center. That one I got to look up, and I got to get back to you. And whoever, please, whoever asked.
President, is Sonia Everesty, the director of the Child Care Center. Would you like me to assist with that question?
Yes. Thank you, Sonia.
Okay. So the Department of Education, the pre-K program will be open full-time in September in the fall from 8:30 to 3 p.m. And that's for children 4-year-olds. We are working with Denise for reopening the other areas as well.
Great. Great. I'm so glad that Sonia attended the town hall and saved me.
Okay, so there is a question about the Everbridge app. Is it updated so that faculty and students can travel, I think? That's the question, and not have to quarantine. Is that updated?
I think, Rochelle, that might refer to the fact that there had been a question about out of state and other travel originally in Everbridge, because it was a CDC issue during really the darkest days of COVID, right? Remember, you couldn't travel, and if you did, you had to quarantine. It was this quarantine requirement. I believe that the quarantine requirements have been modified. You don't hear so much about them anymore, thank goodness. And I think the app has been updated. I mean, I just did it yesterday. I should remember this because I did it, I went into my office. But we can check on that. I think the interesting question about Everbridge is, will it be set up to do verification of vaccination status? Because again, that would make it easy. That or modification to the barcode on our IDs. I want, again, in the fall, when these protocols are in place and we're feeling that the environment is safe to go back, you need to be able to get in and out efficiently, right? No one wants to stand in a long line. So we've got to figure out what's the right way to verify your status. Is it with Everbridge or with CUNY or with your ID?
Will we still need to perform the pre-check and requirements to come on campus in the fall?
For now, assume the answer to be yes, because I don't know otherwise, but it is certainly possible that we reach a point where, and I think we should all hope for this because it would mean that health conditions are, dramatically improved, a point where we would go to campus and upon entering, show an ID and or a thing like the Excelsior Pass with our positive vaccination status, or the exemption that you get for an accommodation. I should have said this earlier, but of course, people will be eligible to apply for an accommodation based on a health condition or a sincere religious objection to vaccination. And so those will be awarded. That's through HR, of course. But we need to have a simple way to demonstrate your status, right? And including the negative COVID test, and just get to work, right? Or get to class.
What about parking? Is that going to be available?
We're going to reopen the park. We're going to reopen the parking lot quite well this summer. We have a third-party business that runs the parking lot, and during COVID, they weren't making any money, so it got kind of relaxed, let's just say. And folks have been parking for free, including a lot of people from the community that have nothing to do with LaGuardia, but appreciate the parking space. So that operator, Shahir, is bringing that operator back, I believe August 1st, and perhaps sooner. There will be and there'll be an announcement in one of my updates coming out soon for people the procedure through which we can those of us who want to, can buy parking passes, the 12-week or the 3-week or whatever it is. But we are going back to using the parking lot. We are going back to the structure that I believe has been reviewed by the Senate. And so that, yes, the answer is parking is coming back. Unfortunately, hey, I got to tell you this, you have to pay for it. But remember, the money goes to auxiliary. And what do we do with that money? $750,000 of it was deployed to help students with outstanding balances so they could re-register for the spring semester. So when you have to dig deep and pay for your parking, know that in many cases, it's always going to help students.
So some more questions about improving enrollment. Where do we stand as far as Pathways is concerned? Does the collected data indicate that LaGuardia graduates are having more of their credits accepted into their intended majors at CUNY four-year colleges?
Let me pause and thank whoever submitted that question for taking us to a new topic away from Rochelle and I talking about all day long. And this is really important. From what I know, and I think this is a really interesting thing to look at in the context of our Middle States reaccreditation process, led by Reem Jafar, Professors Reem Jafar and Justin Rogers Cooper and Nav Valera from IR. Really interesting, like this, because this is really about data and assessment and the effect of a major policy like Pathways. And you only know that if you only know its effectiveness if you have really good assessment protocols and you look at the data. From what I have seen for most cases in CUNY, because it's a number of years now, the percentage of credits accepted in the transfer process, right, from a community college 60 credit transcript, the percentage of those credits accepted by the receiving CUNY college has in some cases tripled from prior to Pathways. Going from something like mid-20s to 70, not quite triple, like 26% to 72%. Like really, but a really significant gain in the percentage of credits accepted by the receiving college. which was a fundamental point of Pathways, right? To smooth the transition through the CUNY system for community college students. And so I think most of the evidence, and I'm not an expert, this is a good, obviously better question for Paul, but our Cario, our provost, and Dion Miller. My sense is, based on what I've seen, yes, the answer is a pretty clear yes, that Pathways has really helped to facilitate successful transfer and dramatically increase the percentage of accepted credits. Is it perfect? No. Do our LaGuardia students still have classes or credits rejected upon transfer? Yes. We need, we've got to double down on working on improving articulation agreements. And also there's something very exciting that Paul and Dion are working on with some sister receiving colleges, which we're calling academies. We're working on a STEM academy. In fact, we have a meeting this afternoon with Queens College. And Paul just explained to me this morning that we're working on a business academy with Baruch. And in the academy model, a student is kind of getting joint admission. They're applying to LaGuardia and Baruch at the same time. And it's a way to take Pathways and actually put it on steroids, because the receiving college has helped design the entire, it's a co-design of the curriculum of the program, so that the even higher percentage of credits will be accepted. And frankly, the student just doesn't have to worry so much about a successful transfer. So you start at LaGuardia and you end up in these STEM majors at Queens College. You start at LaGuardia and you end up at Baruch. It's much more automatic. So it's an ongoing challenge, but yes, Pathways has been fundamental to that success.
So President Adams is 3, but can we just take a few more? Is that okay with you?
It's absolutely.
Okay, so this question it's kind of broad, but how will you bring your authority to support successful, innovative faculty-led programs? That's an interesting question. But one thing I feel as part of my job is to use if you will, my office or the influence of my office to shine a spotlight on faculty-led initiatives, like COIL, for example, or the Humanitarian Initiative, or there's some really amazing work done by LaGuardia faculty. Professor Holly Morgan Porter and her work in environmental sciences with the students that are planning the Greenway on 29th Street. Mm-hmm. Or, I'm starting to, I get in trouble, I start giving too many examples, but my job, I went to the film festival last night, 51 amazing films submitted in Joyce Rubin's film program. David Stott, Professor Stott, did an amazing program last night. Of course, it coincided with the Pride Parade celebration online, which also everything was last night, right? And it was also, which was fantastic. And at the same time, there was the student music performances, which fortunately are on YouTube, and everyone, please, please, please watch those over the weekend if you couldn't make it last night. It all happened at the same time. But part of my job, Rochelle, is to shine a spotlight on these outstanding contributions by our faculty, which in many cases are really unique in CUNY and beyond. And so there's sort of a win-win here, because actually it's a win on 3 levels. If we look at all the incredible work, our COIL partnerships around the country, the new MENA initiatives, Middle East, North African countries that have identified, where schools, universities have been identified for the latest COIL initiative we're doing with the Stevens Institute. It's fantastic. It's not happening anywhere else. And so what happens is, if I can use the power of my office, if you will, to promote and spotlight on these incredible activities, look, number one, I want to honor the faculty doing the work. They're the ones doing the work. But, I'm also making a commercial for LaGuardia. I'm also saying this is unique and special for our institution, and we should be really proud of it. And I'm also trying to send a message to students: you're in a special place. And I'm trying to send a message to what I'll call future students. Because for me, every high school kid in Queens is a future student. Every adult in Queens that has some college, some CUNY credit, but never got the degree, is a future LaGuardia student. And then people who are, as we sit here this afternoon, wherever we're sitting in the New York metropolitan area,
There could be people all around the world, because remember, we have students from 158 countries, 81% of the countries on the planet. So there could be people all around the world who, we don't know it yet, they don't know it yet, but they can make their way to Queens and they're a future student, right? So part of my job is to tell that story to those future students, as that's a part of building enrollment. So bully pulpit, shine a spotlight. If I can help raise money, working with Laura Bartovics and the grants team. And I think that's I think that's what I could do. I mean, I sell, Rochelle, like my job big time, like as president of this college, is to go out and sell LaGuardia many different ways to many different audiences. And our great faculty, they do the work and they create these initiatives. That's like the product, if you will. I don't want to put it so crass, but they give me these amazing stories. And then I go out and say, okay, how do we tell the story to build enrollment and raise money?
There's a question about student affairs. Will the Division of Student Affairs remain subdivided when the official search is announced?
Yes, and unless I would be really surprised. I have left the planning to Dr. Faye Butler and Dr. Gail Bax Jarrett. They each have a team, all right? So Gail in enrollment management has an enrollment management planning committee. Dr. Butler has a student success planning committee. They pick the members of those groups. Those groups will have representation from across the campus. Their assignment, their charge, if you will, from me is to deliver a plan to me on July 15th. Really two plans, one from each division. What should it look like? What's the mission? What are the key functions? What departments are there currently, maybe shouldn't be there in the future? Perhaps they should be another part of the college. What departments should be there that are not there currently? What resources are needed? What's the leadership structure? And why? What's the argument for success? Like, how will this new structure drive the results we need, students require? So they're each working on those plans, Rochelle, and they're going to deliver them, as I say, in mid-July, and then we'll take it from there. But I do believe we will continue, unless they really advise against it, to develop a system of two separate divisions: enrollment management, student success.
So maybe we could end on your vision for the college. Just a question someone put it there.
End on that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my, all right, this is going to sound like a terrible cop-out. Next week on Wednesday, I give my remarks for closing sessions. And if I bend your ears for the next 10 minutes or longer, on my vision for the college, there will be no reason whatsoever for you to pay attention to my closing session remarks next week. So I love the question. I will warn you, as I've said before, I haven't been at LaGuardia even a year, so it would be presumptuous of me to take out, a piece of granite and chisel into it some statement of my vision. My vision isn't mine. My vision is collective. My vision is based on all of you and my best effort to listen and learn in this first year of my tenure, to listen and learn and to you and to students. I have SGA tonight at 5 o'clock. So I'll be, it's probably our last SGA meeting of the semester, but I spent a lot of time with those guys. And the point is, it's a work in progress, but things are becoming clearer. And I will share that clarity, at least where it exists, next week and in my closing sessions remarks. And by giving you this answer, which could be considered a cop-out or a punt or a postponement, I'm freeing you all up, and it's 3:06 anyway, so we've already gone over time.
Yes, we did. Well, thank you for doing the town halls and for addressing our concerns. And I think we should remind everyone to continue to look out for the return to campus updates from you.
Yes, thank you for that plug, that shameless plug. We started sending these out, led by Robert Jaffney Communications team, every Tuesday. And I want to apologize in advance. There's a lot of stuff in flux. So sometimes they're going to come out and you're going to say, there's really nothing interesting here and there's no news. But you never know. So there's one coming out this coming Tuesday. We're already working on it. And my point is, when I get information from the central office addressing any of those 5 variables that I described, or anything else related to our safe and full return to campus, anything that could address the concerns that I know you all have about ensuring that we have a safe environment, I'm just going to put it in that alert, once a week and get it out. And I'm going to keep cranking them out. I know folks are coming up and looking forward to a very, very well-deserved summer break. And some of these might build up in your inboxes, but from time to time, check your inbox because there'll be updates coming in there even when you're on break. All right. Thank you, Rochelle, so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming.